Tonight, we explore a profound teaching in Zen called sudden awakening. This is the flash of insight that arrives without warning. The moment when something shifts, revealing the deep, unshakable peace that has been waiting for you all along. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. We often imagine that understanding comes slowly, built piece by piece over many years. And sometimes it does, but Zen also speaks of another kind of seeing. A sudden opening, like a window thrown wide on a spring morning. One moment the view is hidden, the next moment it is simply there. This is not something we can force or schedule. It cannot be achieved through effort alone, though effort may prepare the ground. Sudden awakening arrives in its own time, often when we have stopped grasping for it. It comes in ordinary moments, while we are washing rice or watching rain or walking a familiar path. Tonight, we will explore this teaching through stories and reflections. We will meet people who discovered that the door they had been pushing against was never locked. It only needed a gentle touch to swing open. As we begin, let your body settle wherever you are resting. There is nothing you need to figure out, nothing you need to achieve. Simply listen and let these teachings find their way in. Take a slow breath and let us begin. A fruit falls suddenly from the tree. One moment it hangs from the branch. The next moment it lies on the ground. If we only see the falling, it looks instantaneous, almost random. But the ripening that made it possible took months. Sun and rain and the slow work of seasons, all building toward that single moment of release. Sudden awakening works in a similar way. The moment of seeing may arrive in a flash, but something has been preparing us all along. Years of living, of struggling, of paying attention in our own way. We cannot see this preparation while it is happening. We only recognize it afterward, when we look back and understand that nothing was wasted. This creates a beautiful paradox. We must make effort, yet effort alone cannot bring awakening. We must practice, yet practice does not guarantee results. The fruit cannot ripen without the tree doing its work. But the tree cannot force the fruit to fall. It can only do what trees do and trust the process. Zen teaches that this trust is essential. We show up, we do our work, we remain open, and then we let go of demanding a particular outcome. The awakening will come when the conditions are right, and we cannot know in advance when that will be. Our job is simply to keep ripening. This is not passive waiting. It is active patience. We continue to engage fully with our lives, with our practice, with whatever path we are walking. But we hold the results lightly. We stop measuring our progress against some imagined finish line. We discover that the ripening itself has value, regardless of when or whether the fruit falls. Let us explore a story that shows how one man discovered this truth. In a city known for its artists and scholars, there lived a young man named Sen, who had devoted himself to the art of calligraphy. From the age of 12, he had practiced every day, grinding ink and filling page after page with characters. His father had been a calligrapher, and his grandfather before that. The brush was in his bones. Sen had natural talent. His teachers recognized it early and praised his quick progress. By the time he was 20, he could produce characters that most students took years to master. He won competitions. His work was displayed in exhibitions. People spoke of him as a rising star, someone who would bring honor to the tradition. This praise meant everything to Sen. He had grown up in the shadow of his father's reputation, always compared, always measured. When people praised his work, he felt that he was finally becoming someone in his own right. Not just the son of a calligrapher, but a calligrapher himself. He practiced even harder, pushing himself to exceed every expectation. But Sen was not satisfied. He had seen examples of true mastery, works by the great calligraphers of the past, and he knew that his own brush had not yet touched that level. There was something in those ancient scrolls that he could not name, a quality of aliveness that made the characters seem to breathe on the page. His own work was skilled but somehow flat, correct but not alive. He heard about a teacher named Dao who lived outside the city, an elderly woman who had studied with masters now long dead. Few students sought her out because she had a reputation for being difficult. She accepted only those she chose, and she was said to be impossibly demanding. Many who went to her returned frustrated and empty-handed. Sen was not deterred. He was used to being the best. He would show this teacher what he could do, and she would recognize his talent and help him reach the next level. He made the journey to her small house on the edge of the forest. Dao was in her 70s, with white hair pulled back simply and hands that showed decades of work. She received him without warmth, but without hostility either. She simply looked at him and waited. Sen had brought samples of his finest work. He unrolled them with quiet pride, expecting her to see immediately what his other teachers had seen. The precision, the control, the years of dedicated practice evident in every stroke. Dao looked at the scrolls for a long time. Then she rolled them up and handed them back. "Not yet," she said. Sen waited for more. Criticism he could learn from. Specific guidance he could follow. But Dao only turned and went back to her own work, as if he had already left. "What do you mean?" Sen asked, trying to keep the frustration from his voice. "What is missing? Tell me what to correct, and I will correct it." Dao did not look up from her brush. "If I could tell you, you would not need to learn it. Come back when you have something different to show me." Sen returned to the city, humiliated and confused. He had never been dismissed so completely. He threw himself into practice with new intensity, trying to discover what Dao had seen that was lacking. He experimented with different techniques, different styles, different approaches. After 6 months, he returned with new work. Dao looked at it. "Not yet." Sen wanted to argue, to demand an explanation. But something in the old woman's calm certainty stopped him. He went away again. This pattern continued for years. Sen would work obsessively, produce what he believed was his finest effort, make the journey to Dao's house, and receive the same 2 words. "Not yet." Sometimes she would keep him for tea and speak about ordinary things, about the weather or the birds she had seen that morning. Sometimes she would send him away immediately, but she never explained what she was waiting for, never gave him guidance he could follow. The 5th year was the hardest. Sen had created a series of characters that he was certain represented a breakthrough. He had worked on them for months, refining every stroke until they seemed perfect to his eye. He made the journey to Dao's house with real hope for the first time in years. She looked at his work for less than a minute. Not yet. Something broke in Sen that day. He shouted at her, demanded an explanation, accused her of playing games with him. Dao listened without expression. When he was finished, she simply said, "Come back when you have something different to show me." He did not visit her for almost 2 years after that. He told himself he was done with her impossible standards. He returned to teaching, to accepting commissions, to the ordinary life of a working calligrapher. But the work felt hollow now. He could not unsee what he had glimpsed in those old master's scrolls. He could not be satisfied with mere competence when he had tasted the possibility of something more. Eventually, he returned to Dao. She received him as if no time had passed. She looked at his new work. Not yet. Other calligraphers in the city thought Sen was wasting his time. His early promise seemed to have stalled. He no longer won competitions or received commissions. He had become consumed by this impossible quest to satisfy a teacher who could not be satisfied. But something was happening in Sen that he could not see clearly himself. The constant rejection was wearing away at something in him. Not his skill, which continued to develop, but something else. His need to be recognized. His certainty that he knew what good work looked like. His pride in being the talented one, the special one, the one who succeeded where others failed. In his 35th year, Sen made his usual journey to Dao's house. It was autumn, and the leaves were falling from the trees along the path. He had been visiting her for 15 years now. 15 years of not yet. He no longer brought his work with the same expectation he once had. He barely expected anything at all anymore. He had not slept well the night before. He had been working on a single character for weeks, trying variation after variation, and nothing felt right. He was tired in a way that went deeper than his body. Tired of striving. Tired of failing. Tired of the whole endless effort of trying to become something he apparently could not become. He unrolled his latest work for Dao. It was not his best, he knew. He had brought it anyway because he no longer knew what his best was. The categories of good and bad that had once seemed so clear had blurred into uncertainty. Dao looked at the scroll. She looked at it for a long time, longer than usual. Sen waited, expecting the familiar words. But Dao did not say, "Not yet." Instead, she said, "What happened?" Sen did not understand the question. "What do you mean? This is different. Something has changed." "What happened?" Sen thought about it. Nothing had happened, really. He had simply grown tired. He had stopped trying so hard to impress her, stopped trying to produce something worthy, stopped caring so much about the outcome. He had just made the character because making characters was what he did. There was no ambition in it, no hope, just the brush and the ink and the movement of his hand. "I gave up," he said finally. "I stopped trying to make it good. I just made it." Dao nodded slowly. "Yes, I can see that. This is the first honest work you have shown me in 15 years. Sen felt something crack open in his chest. All those years of effort, and what Dao had been waiting for was for him to stop trying. "I do not understand," he said. "You rejected my best work for 15 years. And now you accept this, which I made without even caring." Dao set down her brush and looked at him directly. "Your best work was not your best work. It was your most effortful work. It was full of you, of your wanting to be good, your wanting to be recognized, You're wanting to be the talented one. The characters were correct, but they were not alive. They were performances, not expressions. She gestured to the scroll in front of her. This is different. This came through you, not from you. When you stopped trying to prove something, the brush could finally move freely. The character could finally breathe. Sen looked at his work with new eyes. It was true that something was different about it. The strokes had a quality he could not have achieved through effort. They were looser, more natural, more alive. Not because he had tried to make them that way, but because he had stopped trying to make them any particular way at all. 15 years, he said quietly. You made me wait 15 years for this. I did not make you wait. You were not ready. All your talent, all your practice, all your skill, these were necessary. But they were not enough. You had to exhaust your ambition before you could discover what lay beneath it. You had to fail at becoming a great calligrapher before you could simply be one. Sen stayed with Dao for several more months after that day. But the teaching was different now. She no longer rejected his work. Instead, they worked side by side, two calligraphers making characters, and she would occasionally point out when the old habits crept back in, when he started trying to be good again instead of simply being present. When he finally returned to the city, Sen's work had changed. Other calligraphers noticed it immediately. There was something in his characters now that had not been there before, that quality of aliveness he had admired in the old masters. People asked him what had happened, what technique he had learned, what secret Tao had shared with him. Sen found it difficult to explain. She taught me to give up, he would say, and people would laugh, thinking he was joking. But he was not joking. The secret was not a technique. It was a surrender. All his years of practice had been necessary, but awakening had come only when he stopped grasping for it. The fruit had ripened slowly, invisibly, over 15 years. And then, in one exhausted moment, it had finally fallen. This story shows us the paradox at the heart of sudden awakening. Sen practiced diligently for decades. That practice was essential. But the breakthrough came not through more effort but through less. He had to exhaust his striving before he could discover what lay beneath it. Zen speaks of this as the relationship between effort and grace. We cannot skip the effort. The years of practice, the dedication, the showing up day after day, all of this matters. But we also cannot force the result. At some point, we have to let go and allow something else to take over. The Buddha himself followed this pattern. He spent years in intense practice, pushing himself to extremes of discipline and denial. And then, exhausted and near death, he let go of all his striving. It was in that letting go that awakening found him. The effort had been necessary, but it was the release that opened the door. This is difficult for us to accept. We want to believe that more effort will always produce more results. We want a direct relationship between what we put in and what we get out. But awakening does not work this way. It asks us to do our work fully, and then to surrender the outcome. To ripen and ripen and ripen, and then to let the fruit fall when it is ready. Let us explore another story that shows how this ripening can happen across a lifetime. In a valley where rice had been grown for more generations than anyone could count, there lived a young woman named Nori who had loved her grandfather more than anyone in the world. He had been a rice farmer all his life, as his father had been, and his father before that. The family had worked the same fields for 200 years. What Nori remembered most about her grandfather was not his skill at farming, though that was considerable. It was the quality of his presence. When he stood in the rice paddies at dusk, there was something about him that she could not name. A stillness, a completeness, as if he and the fields and the fading light were all one thing, breathing together. She would watch him from the edge of the water, a small girl in muddy sandals, and feel that she was witnessing something important, something she wanted to understand. "Grandfather," she asked him once, "what do you think about when you stand in the fields?" He looked at her with those calm eyes that always seemed to be seeing something beyond what was visible. "I do not think," he said. "I just stand." This answer made no sense to her at the time. How could someone not think? The mind was always thinking. That was what minds did. Her grandfather died when Nori was 16. It was a gentle death, in his sleep, after a long day of work in the fields he loved. The whole village mourned him. He had been one of those people whose presence made everyone around them feel more settled, more at peace. After his death, Nori felt a desperate need to understand what he had known. That quality she had witnessed in him, that stillness, that sense of being completely at home in the world. She wanted it for herself. She felt that if she could understand it, she would still be connected to him somehow. She asked everyone who had known him, the other farmers, the village elders, her own parents. What was his secret? What practice did he follow? What wisdom had he attained? No one could tell her. He was just himself, they said. He had always been that way. He worked hard. He was kind. He loved the land. There was no secret teaching, no special practice. He just lived his life, day after day, in the fields that his family had tended for generations. This frustrated Nori deeply. There had to be something more. That quality she had witnessed could not come from nothing. It had to be earned somehow, learned somehow. She refused to believe it was simply given to some people and not others. She tried to find teachers who could explain what her grandfather had embodied. She read what books she could find about the mind and the spirit. She traveled to a distant monastery and spent a year studying with the monks there. She learned meditation techniques and philosophical concepts. She practiced diligently, sitting in stillness for hours, watching her breath, trying to quiet her mind. The monks were kind and patient. They told her she was making progress. They said that with continued practice, she would find what she was looking for. But Nori sensed that what she sought was different from what they were teaching. They spoke of transcending the world, of rising above ordinary life. Her grandfather had not risen above anything. He had been fully in his life, in his fields, in the mud and water and growing rice. His peace had not come from escaping the ordinary. It had somehow been found within it. When she returned home and stood in the rice paddies at dusk, she did not feel what her grandfather had seemed to feel. She felt like a young woman standing in a field, trying to feel something she did not feel. Years passed. Nori married a man from a neighboring village and moved to his family's farm. She had children of her own. She worked the land as her grandfather had, as his grandfather had, as all the generations before had. The daily rhythm of farming life absorbed her. Planting, tending, harvesting, the endless cycle of seasons and years. The work was hard but satisfying in its way. She came to know her husband's fields as she had known her grandfather's, learning their particular qualities, their needs, their moods in different weather. She raised her children with love and watched them grow. She buried her husband when he fell ill in their 30th year of marriage, and she continued alone as farmers have always continued. She still thought about her grandfather sometimes, especially at dusk when the light turned golden over the fields. She still wished she could understand what he had known. But gradually, the desperate seeking softened into something gentler. She could not force the understanding to come. She could only live her life and see what happened. Sometimes she wondered if she had been chasing something that did not exist. Perhaps her grandfather had simply been a peaceful man, and she had made more of it than was there. Perhaps the quality she remembered had been a child's imagination, not a real state that could be attained. These doubts troubled her, but she did not know how to resolve them. When her own children were grown and her husband had been gone for many years, Nori inherited her grandfather's original fields. Her cousin had been working them, but he was old now and ready to rest. He asked if she wanted to return to the land where she had grown up. Nori said yes. She was 60 years old, and she had been away from those fields for most of her life. But they had never really left her. The first evening back, she walked out to the paddies at dusk. The light was golden, just as she remembered. The water reflected the sky. The young rice plants stood in their patient rows, as rice plants had stood in this place for 2 centuries. Nori stood at the edge of the field. She was not trying to feel anything special. She was not practicing any technique she had learned. She was just tired from the journey, and the evening was beautiful, and her feet knew this ground even after all the years away. And something shifted. She could not have said when it happened. One moment she was standing there, an old woman looking at a rice field. The next moment, or perhaps the same moment, there was no separation between her and what she was looking at. The field, the water, the light, her own body, her own awareness, all of it was one seamless whole. She was not observing the evening. She was the evening observing itself. The feeling lasted only a moment, or perhaps it lasted forever. Time had become strange and soft. When ordinary perception returned, Nori found that she was crying, though she did not feel sad. She felt like something she had been carrying for 44 years had finally been set down. She understood now what her grandfather had known. Not with her mind, which still could not explain it, but with something deeper. He had not achieved his stillness through any special practice. He had simply lived his life fully, worked his land honestly, shown up for each day as it came. And somewhere along the way, the separation between himself and his life had worn thin and then dissolved. All her seeking had been necessary. The years of questioning, the monastery, the books, the longing, not because any of it had given her the answer, but because she had needed to exhaust the seeking before she could simply be, just as her grandfather had been, just as, she realized now, she had always been, beneath all her striving. She returned to the house as darkness fell. Her body felt the same. Her mind still produced its usual thoughts, but something was different now. Something she could not name, but also could not doubt. In the years that followed, Nori worked the fields as her grandfather had. She did not teach anyone what she had experienced that evening. She would not have known how to put it into words. But people noticed something about her. The way she moved through her days, the quality of her presence, the stillness that seemed to surround her when she stood in the rice paddies at dusk. Her grandchildren would watch her from the edge of the water, just as she had watched her grandfather so many years ago. And sometimes they would ask her, "Grandmother, what do you think about when you stand in the fields?" Nori would look at them with calm eyes and give the same answer her grandfather had given her, the answer that made no sense until it suddenly made all the sense in the world. "I do not think. I just stand." Both Sen and Nori ripened over many years before their moment of awakening arrived. Sen's ripening happened through dedicated practice and the slow exhaustion of his ambition. Nori's ripening happened through a lifetime of living, of working, of carrying a question she could not answer. In both cases, the awakening itself came suddenly, a moment when something shifted and they saw what they had not been able to see before. But that moment was made possible by everything that came before it. The fruit fell suddenly, but it fell because it had ripened. Buddhism teaches that we cannot skip the ripening. We cannot jump straight to awakening through some clever shortcut. We must live our lives, do our work, walk our path. The years of effort are not obstacles to awakening. They are the ground from which awakening grows. But we must also hold our effort lightly. If we grasp too tightly at the goal, we prevent it from arriving. The fruit does not fall faster because we stare at it impatiently. It falls when it is ready, in its own time, according to its own nature. This is perhaps the deepest teaching about sudden awakening. It comes suddenly, but we cannot make it come. It requires our participation, but we cannot control it. We do our part, and then we trust. We ripen, and we wait. And when the moment finally arrives, we discover that we were always ready. We just could not see it until we could. Let your breath settle now. Feel the weight of your body resting where it is. You are ripening too, in ways you cannot see. Trust the process and let yourself rest. We often imagine that awakening happens in special places, on mountain tops shrouded in mist, in ancient temples where incense burns, in the presence of great teachers who speak words of power. We think that if we could only find the right setting, the right circumstances, the right moment, then insight would finally come. But Zen points us in a different direction. The great masters did not awaken in extraordinary circumstances. They awoke while sweeping floors, cooking rice, walking down dusty roads. They discovered that the ordinary is not separate from the sacred. The sacred is hidden within the ordinary, waiting to be noticed. This teaching can be difficult to accept. We want our awakening to be dramatic, special, worthy of the transformation we hope for. But the truth is simpler and stranger. The doorway we seek is not somewhere else. It is right here, in this moment, in whatever we happen to be doing. Washing dishes can be a doorway. Folding laundry can be a doorway. Any act performed with full presence can crack open the wall between our small selves and something larger. The Buddha taught that enlightenment is available in every moment, not just in moments of meditation or prayer, but in all moments. The challenge is not to find the special moment, but to recognize that every moment is special. Or rather, that the categories of special and ordinary dissolve when we are truly present. Tonight, as we explore this teaching, let yourself consider the ordinary activities of your own life, the tasks you perform without thinking, the routines you move through automatically. Each one is a potential doorway. Each one is a place where awakening might be waiting. Let us explore a story that shows how one woman found awakening in the most ordinary of acts. In a town where travelers often stopped to rest before continuing their journeys, there lived a woman named Cho who had inherited her mother's tea house 6 months ago. Her mother had run the tea house for 35 years, and in all that time, it had been famous throughout the region. People would travel extra miles just to taste her mother's tea. There was nothing obviously special about what her mother served. The same leaves that other tea houses used, the same water from the same well, the same simple cups and the same iron kettle. And yet, people who drank her mother's tea said it was different, more alive somehow, more present. They could not explain what made it so, but they felt it. Cho had grown up watching her mother work. She had learned to prepare tea at her mother's side, mimicking her movements, trying to absorb her technique. By the time she was grown, she could perform every step of the process exactly as her mother did. The precise temperature of the water, the exact amount of leaves, the particular way of pouring that her mother had developed over decades. When her mother died, peacefully in her sleep after a long illness, Cho took over the tea house. She was confident that she could maintain what her mother had built. She knew all the steps. She had practiced for years. The tea would be the same, but it was not the same. Cho could see it in the faces of the customers who had known her mother's tea. They were polite. They said the tea was good. But something in their eyes told her the truth. The magic was gone. "It does not taste like your mother's," one old man finally said. He had been coming to the tea house for 20 years. He spoke gently, not wanting to hurt her, but also not wanting to lie. "I am sorry. I do not know why, but it is different." Cho knew he was right. She had been feeling it herself, a wrongness she could not identify. She was doing everything exactly as her mother had done. Every step, every measurement, every gesture. And yet the result was hollow, a copy without a soul. She tried making adjustments, different amounts of leaves, different steeping times. She even traveled to buy leaves from the same merchant her mother had favored, wondering if she had somehow gotten the wrong supplier. Nothing helped. The tea remained ordinary, competent, forgettable. The customers began to drift away. Not all at once, but gradually. The travelers still stopped because the location was convenient. But the people who had come specifically for the tea, the ones who had known her mother, they stopped coming. Cho felt sad. She had inherited this place, this legacy, and she was destroying it. Her mother had built something beautiful over 35 years, and Cho was watching it crumble in 6 months. She considered selling the tea house. Perhaps someone else could do what she could not. One afternoon, a traveling monk arrived. He was an older man named Bo, with a weathered face and calm eyes. He ordered tea and sat by the window, watching the street outside. Cho prepared his cup with the same careful attention she gave every customer, though her heart was not in it anymore. When she brought the tea to his table, he did not drink immediately. He simply looked at the cup for a long moment. Then he looked at her. "You are unhappy," he said. It was not a question. Cho was startled by his directness. "I am fine." "You are not fine. I can see it in how you move. You carry something heavy." Perhaps it was the kindness in his voice. Perhaps it was the exhaustion of pretending. Cho found herself sitting down across from him and telling him everything. Her mother's death. The tea that was not the same. The customers who had stopped coming. Her feeling that she had failed at the one thing her mother had left her. Bo listened without interrupting. When she was finished, he asked, "When you make tea, what are you thinking about?" Cho considered the question. "I think about getting it right. About doing it the way my mother did. About whether this cup will be good enough." "So you are thinking about your mother. About the past. About judgment." "I suppose so." "Yes." Bo nodded slowly. "And when you watched your mother make tea, what did she seem to be thinking about?" Cho tried to remember. Her mother at the kettle. Her mother pouring water over leaves. Her mother's hands so steady and unhurried. What had she been thinking about? "I do not know," Cho admitted. She just seemed present. Like there was nothing else in the world except what she was doing. "Yes," Bo said. "That is the difference." He picked up his cup and held it, but still did not drink. "You are trying to make tea like your mother." But your mother was not trying to make tea like anyone. She was just making tea. Fully present with the water, the leaves, the cup. Not thinking about the past or the future. Not comparing herself to anyone. Just here, doing this one thing completely. Cho felt something shift in her chest, though she could not have said what. "But I am doing the same steps. The same process. The steps are not the tea. The process is not the tea. The tea is made by whoever is present while making it. Your mother was present. You are somewhere else, worrying about whether you are good enough, whether you are doing it right, whether you can live up to her memory. You are not here, and the tea knows it." Bo finally took a sip. He paused, considering. "This tea is made by someone who is afraid. Someone who is trying too hard. That is what I taste." He said it gently, without judgment. But the words struck Cho like a bell. He was right. She had been so focused on replicating her mother that she had never simply been present with what she was doing. She had been making tea with her mind in the past, in comparison, in fear. She had never just made tea. Bo returned the next day, and the day after that. He never asked for anything special. He simply ordered tea and sat by the window. Sometimes he watched Cho work. Sometimes he looked out at the street. He rarely spoke, but his presence had a quality of attention that made Cho aware of herself in a new way. She began to notice when her mind wandered to comparison. When she started thinking about her mother, about the customers, about whether this cup would be good enough. Each time she noticed, she tried to come back. Just this water, just this cup, just this moment of pouring. It was harder than she expected. Her mind wanted to wander. It wanted to judge and compare and worry. But slowly, with practice, she began to find moments of simple presence. Moments when there was just the steam rising, just her hands on the kettle, just the sound of water meeting leaves. One afternoon, several weeks after Bo had first arrived, Cho was preparing tea for a customer. She had slept poorly the night before, and her mind was too tired for its usual worrying. She went through the steps without thinking about them, without comparing, without hoping or fearing. She was just tired, and so she just made tea. She brought the cup to the customer, an old woman she did not recognize. The woman took a sip and paused. Then she looked up at Cho with an expression of surprise. "This is wonderful," she said. "This is like the tea I had here years ago when the old woman was still alive." Cho felt something open in her chest. She thanked the customer and returned to her work, but her hands were trembling slightly. Something had happened. Something had shifted. That evening, she told Bo what the customer had said. He smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him. "You got out of your own way," he said. "You stopped trying to be your mother and just made tea. The tea you made was yours, but it was also your mother's because she taught you the same thing I am telling you, only she taught it through years of watching rather than through words. She was not performing tea. She was just present with it. And today, for a moment, so were you. But I was only present because I was too tired to think," Cho said. "How do I do it again when I am not exhausted?" Practice. Notice when you leave the present moment. Notice when you start comparing or worrying or trying to be someone else. And then come back. Again and again, come back. It will not always be perfect. Some days you will be distracted and the tea will be ordinary. But you have tasted now what is possible. You know the door is there. You just have to keep walking through it. Bo left the next morning, continuing on whatever journey he was taking. Cho never saw him again. But she did not need to. He had shown her something she could not unsee. The tea she had been trying to make was not found in techniques or steps. It was found in presence, in being here, fully, with whatever she was doing. The tea house slowly rebuilt its reputation. Not exactly as it had been in her mother's time, but in its own way. People began to say that Cho's tea had something special, though they could not explain what. She did not try to explain it either. She just made tea, present with the water, present with the leaves, present with the moment, and somehow that presence was what people tasted in their cups. This story shows us how awakening can come through the most ordinary activities. Cho was not meditating on a mountain. She was making tea in a small shop, something she had done thousands of times before. But when she finally stopped trying to be someone else, when she finally became present with what she was doing, something shifted. The ordinary act became a doorway. Zen teaches that any activity can be a practice. It does not matter what we are doing. What matters is how we are doing it. When we bring full attention to the present moment, when we stop dividing ourselves between what we are doing and what we think we should be doing, the boundary between ordinary and sacred dissolves. The Buddha spoke of mindfulness as a foundation of the path. But mindfulness is not something we add to our lives like another task on the list. It is a quality of presence we can bring to everything we already do. The dishes are still dishes. The tea is still tea. But we are different with them. We are here. And that presence transforms everything. Let us explore another story that reveals more of this teaching. In a region where great buildings were made from stone, there lived a stonecutter named Wei, who had practiced his trade for over 30 years. His hands knew the grain of rock the way a farmer's hands know soil. He could look at a block of stone and see where it wanted to break, where its hidden fractures lay, where it would yield to the chisel, and where it would resist. When Wei was young, the work had been a joy. Each day brought the satisfaction of shaping something solid and lasting. The buildings he helped create would stand for generations. His hands were part of something larger than himself. But now Wei was 53 years old, and the joy had faded. His shoulders ached constantly. His fingers cramped around the chisel. The younger stonecutters worked faster, struck harder, produced more. He watched them and saw his own youth, and the watching made him feel old. He had begun to dread the work that had once fulfilled him. Each morning he woke to the same routine, the same stones, the same endless chipping away. He counted the years until he could stop. 5 more years, maybe 10, until his hands gave out completely, or he had saved enough to rest. The number felt impossibly large. Working beside him was an old stonecutter named Wan, who had been at the trade even longer than Wei. Wan was 68 now, his hair white, his face deeply lined. By any measure, he should have been slower than Wei, weaker, more worn out. But there was something different about how Wan worked. He did not seem to be suffering through his days. He moved with a kind of ease that Wei could not understand. One afternoon, Wei's frustration spilled over. They were working on a large block together, shaping it for a temple wall. Wei's arms burned. His back screamed. And Wan just kept working beside him, steady and calm, as if cutting stone was the most natural thing in the world. "How do you bear it?" Wei asked, his voice harsh with exhaustion. "Day after day, year after year. This endless work that wears us down to nothing. How do you not go mad?" One set down his chisel and looked at Wei with something like compassion. "You are suffering." "Of course I am suffering. We break our bodies against rock until we cannot break anymore. That is the life of a stonecutter. That is one way to see it. What other way is there?" One considered the question. He picked up a small piece of stone that had chipped away from the block they were working on. He turned it in his weathered fingers. "When you strike the stone," he said, "where is your mind?" Wei did not understand. "What do you mean? My mind is on the work." "Is it? Or is your mind on your aching shoulders, on the years you have left to endure, on the young men who work faster than you, on the past when the work was easier, or the future when you hope it will end?" Wei was silent. One had described exactly where his mind spent most of its time. "The stone does not care about any of that," one continued. "The stone is only here. This moment. This strike. When you bring your chisel down, the stone meets you where you are. If you are here, fully present, the strike is clean. If you are somewhere else, worrying or remembering or wishing, the strike is divided. You work against yourself. But the pain is real. The exhaustion is real. Yes, I feel pain too. My body is older than yours and complains louder. But there is a difference between pain that is here and suffering that we add to it. The pain is in this moment. The suffering is made of all the moments we pile on top of it. The years behind, the years ahead, the comparisons and judgments. That is what exhausts us, not the stone. Wei wanted to argue, but something in Wan's words rang true. He did spend most of his time somewhere other than where he was. In the past, when he was young and strong. In the future, when he imagined rest. Rarely here, in this moment, with this stone. "Watch," one said. He picked up his chisel and positioned it against the block. "I am not going to show you a technique. I am going to show you a way of being." He raised his hammer and brought it down. The strike was nothing special to watch. An old man hitting a chisel, same as any stonecutter. But there was something in how he did it. A quality of attention, of completeness, as if that single strike was the only thing in the world, and it was enough. "Now you," one said. Wei raised his own hammer. He tried to clear his mind of everything except the stone in front of him, the chisel point against the rock, his hand on the handle. He brought the hammer down. The strike felt different. He could not say how exactly. A little cleaner, a little more whole, like less of him was fighting against it. "Again," one said. They worked together for the rest of the afternoon. One did not give instructions. He simply worked beside Wei, occasionally reminding him to come back when his mind wandered. Here, this strike, just this. Over the following weeks, Wei practiced what one had shown him. It was difficult. His mind wanted to wander to its familiar places of complaint and comparison. But each time he noticed it had gone, he brought it back. This strike, just this. Something began to change. The work was still hard. His body still ached. But the suffering that had made each day feel endless began to soften. When he was present, truly present with each strike, the strike was just a strike. Not a symbol of his declining years. Not one of millions he had yet to endure. Just this movement, this sound, this moment of stone yielding to iron. One morning, Wei arrived at the work site feeling particularly old. He had not slept well. His hands were stiff with the cold. He looked at the block of stone waiting for him and felt the familiar dread. But he picked up his chisel anyway. He positioned it. He raised the hammer. And as he brought it down, something opened. The strike was complete. Not just clean, but whole in a way he had never felt before. There was no way separate from the striking. No stone separate from the chisel. No past or future. No years of work behind or ahead. There was just this single moment of contact, of change, of creation. It was everything. It was enough. The feeling lasted only an instant. But Wei stood there with his hammer raised for the next strike, and he found that he was smiling. Not because his circumstances had changed. His shoulders still ached. The cold still bit at his hands. But something else had changed. He had tasted what one had been pointing toward all along. Work did not have to be endured until it ended. Each moment of work could be complete in itself. Each strike was not a step towards some future goal. It was its own arrival, its own fullness. His whole life, he had been rushing through the strikes to get somewhere else. And now he saw that there was nowhere else to get. That evening, he found one putting away his tools. "It happened," Wei said. "This morning. I do not know how to describe it." One nodded, unsurprised. "You stopped leaving." "What?" "All these years, you have been leaving each moment as quickly as you arrived in it. Rushing to the next strike, the next day, the next year. This morning, you stayed. You let one moment be complete before moving to the next. Will it happen again? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. The moment of opening cannot be forced, but you can keep practicing presence. Keep coming back to where you are. The opening will find you when it finds you. And even when it does not, the practice itself changes things. You suffer less. You fight yourself less. The work becomes just work, not a battle against time. Wei continued as a stonecutter for another 12 years. His body continued to age, to slow, to complain. But something was different now. He no longer dreaded the days. He no longer counted the years until rest. He had found rest in the middle of the work, not by escaping the difficulty, but by meeting it fully, one strike at a time. When younger workers asked him how he endured, he would sometimes try to explain, but the words never captured it. The best he could do was work beside them, as one had worked beside him, and hope that they might see for themselves. The doorway was always there. It was just a strike away. The only question was whether they would be present enough to walk through it. Both Cho and Wei found awakening not by leaving their ordinary lives, but by entering them more fully. Cho discovered that presence was the ingredient her tea had been missing. Wei discovered that presence could transform endless work into something complete and whole. Zen teaches that there is no moment that is not a potential doorway. We do not need to seek special circumstances. We do not need to wait for the right conditions. The conditions are always right, because the door is always here. It is only our distraction, our constant leaving of the present moment, that makes us miss it. The Buddha sat under a tree and saw the morning star and awakened. But he did not awaken because of the tree or the star. He awakened because he was finally present. The star was the doorway because he was there to walk through it. Any moment could have been the same. Any ordinary sight, any common experience. Presence is what makes the ordinary luminous. As you rest tonight, consider the ordinary moments of your own life. The acts you perform without attention. The routines you move through while your mind is elsewhere. Each of these is a doorway waiting to be noticed. You do not need to change what you do. You only need to be present with it. And in that presence, the door may swing open when you least expect it. Let your breath come naturally now. Feel the simple act of breathing, ordinary and constant. Even this breath can be a doorway. Simply be here with it and rest. Sometimes we choose to question our lives. We read something that opens our minds, or we meet a teacher who points us in a new direction. We decide to look deeper, and we proceed at our own pace, in our own time. But sometimes life does not wait for us to be ready. Something happens that we did not expect and could not have prepared for. A loss we never imagined. A change that overturns everything we thought was solid. In these moments, we do not choose to awaken. We are shaken awake, whether we want to be or not. These experiences can be painful. When our careful plans fall apart, when what we counted on disappears, we feel lost and afraid. The ground we stood on has crumbled, and we do not know where to put our feet. But Zen teaches that these moments of disruption can also be doorways. When what we cling to falls away, we discover what cannot fall away. When our hands are forced open, they can finally receive something new. The breaking apart makes room for something else to come through. This is not to say that loss is good or that we should seek out difficulty. Pain is pain. Grief is grief. But within the pain and grief, there is sometimes an opening, a crack in our usual defenses through which light can enter. If we can stay present with what is happening, rather than closing down against it, we may find that the worst moments of our lives become unexpected teachers. The Buddha himself began his journey through a kind of breaking open. He had lived in comfort and certainty, protected from the harder truths of existence. When he finally encountered old age, sickness, and death, his comfortable world collapsed. But that collapse was not the end of his story. It was the beginning. Let us explore a story that shows how one man found something precious in the midst of losing everything. In a prosperous city along a great river, there lived a silk merchant named Jin, who had built his business over 25 years. He had started as a young man with nothing but ambition and a willingness to work. He had traveled to distant villages to find the finest silk. He had built relationships with weavers and dyers. He had earned a reputation for quality that brought customers from far away. By the time he was 50, Jin had everything he had worked for. A large warehouse filled with silk of every color, a comfortable home, respect in his community. He had married a woman he loved, raised 3 children who were now grown and starting their own lives. When he walked through the market, people nodded to him with admiration. He had made something of himself. Jin took pride in what he had built. Not arrogant pride, but the quiet satisfaction of a man who had set out to do something and done it. His life made sense to him. He understood where he had come from and where he was going. The future stretched out before him, comfortable and secure. The flood came in autumn, during the season of heavy rains. The river had flooded before, but never like this. The water rose higher than anyone could remember, higher than the marks on the old walls that recorded floods from generations past. It came in the night, while the city slept. Jin woke to the sound of shouting. By the time he reached his warehouse, the water was already chest-deep inside. He waded through the dark, trying to save what he could, but the silk was ruined. Water and silk do not forgive each other. Bolts that had been worth fortunes were now worthless rags. He worked through the night with his workers, pulling what little could be saved to higher ground. But by morning, he could see the truth. His warehouse was destroyed. His inventory was gone. 25 years of building, swept away in a single night. The days that followed were a blur. Jin went through the motions of salvage and assessment, but his mind could not grasp what had happened. He kept expecting to wake up and find it had been a dream. But each morning, he woke to the same mud-filled streets, the same ruined warehouse, the same emptiness where his life's work had been. His wife tried to comfort him. His children came to help with the cleanup. Friends offered what support they could. But Jin felt strangely distant from all of it. He nodded and thanked people and did what needed to be done, but inside he felt hollow. Something had broken that he did not know how to fix. A few weeks after the flood, when the waters had receded and the city was beginning to rebuild, Jin found himself walking along the riverbank at dusk. He did not know why he had come here. The river that had destroyed everything flowed past, calm now, almost peaceful. It did not seem to know or care what it had done. An old ferryman named Shan was tying up his boat for the night. Jin had seen him before, had probably ridden in his boat at some point over the years. Shan was one of those people who had always been there, part of the background of the city, noticed and unnoticed at the same time. Shan looked up as Jin approached. "You are the silk merchant." "I was the silk merchant," Jin replied. The sadness in his own voice surprised him. Shan nodded slowly, his weathered hands working the ropes with practiced ease. "The river took much from many people. It took everything from me. Everything I spent my life building. Yes, the river does that sometimes." Shan finished with his ropes and straightened up, looking out at the water. "I have ferried people across this river for 40 years. I have seen many floods, many losses." Jin did not know why he was standing here talking to a ferryman. He should be home, planning how to rebuild, figuring out what to do next. But he could not seem to make himself move. "How do you bear it?" he asked. "Watching people lose everything, knowing the river could take your boat, your livelihood, your life at any moment." Shan considered the question. He did not answer immediately, which Jin appreciated. Too many people had been giving him quick answers, easy reassurances that felt hollow. "The river takes many things," Shan finally said. "But tell me, what did it leave?" Jin felt annoyed. What kind of question was that? The river had left nothing. Mud and ruin, and the shell of what used to be his life. But Shan waited, and something in his patient silence made Jin actually consider the question instead of dismissing it. What had the river left? His wife was alive. His children were safe. His own body, tired and heartsick, but still breathing. His mind still working even through the fog of grief. "It left me, I suppose," Jin said slowly. "My family. We survived." "Yes. And what else?" Jin did not understand. What else was there? His business was gone. His wealth was gone. His future, as he had imagined it, was gone. Shan seemed to see his confusion. "You are standing here, watching the river. You are breathing. You are aware of the water, the sky, the evening coming on. This awareness that watches, that knows you are here. Did the river take that?" "No," Jin admitted. "But what good is awareness when everything it was aware of is gone?" "That is a good question. I wondered the same thing. Many years ago." Shan sat down on a wooden post by the dock and gestured for Jin to join him. "I was not always a ferryman. I was a builder. I built fine houses for wealthy people. I was proud of my work. And then there was a fire, and several of the houses I had built burned down. People died. It was not my fault. The fire started elsewhere, but I could not build any more after that. My hands shook. My confidence was gone. I lost everything, in a different way than you, but I lost it." Jin sat down beside him. The anger had faded, replaced by something else. A kind of listening he had not been capable of before. "What happened?" "I spent a long time in despair. I drank too much. I pushed away everyone who cared about me. I was very good at suffering." Shan smiled slightly at the memory. "And then one day, I was sitting by this same river, thinking about throwing myself in. I was watching the water, and I realized something strange. The part of me that was watching, the awareness that was present even in my deepest misery, that part was not suffering. The suffering was happening, yes. But there was something else, something underneath that was just present. Just here, watching the water, feeling the air, being alive. He paused, looking out at the river. I did not throw myself in. Instead, I became curious about this awareness that could be present even when everything else had fallen apart. I started paying attention to it, not to the thoughts about what I had lost, not to the grief and the shame, but to the simple fact of being here, alive, aware. And that helped? It did not fix anything. My past was still my past. I still could not build. I still had lost everything. But I found something I had not known I had. A ground beneath the ground. A place to stand that did not depend on my circumstances. Jin sat with this for a while. The evening deepened around them. Lights began to appear in the windows of the city. I do not know how to find what you are describing, he said finally. You are already finding it. Right now, you are here. You are present. The awareness that is listening to me, that is watching the river, that knows your own grief, that awareness is what I am talking about. It has always been here. You just never noticed it because you were so busy with the silk and the business and the building of your life. Shan stood and stretched his old bones. The flood took your silk. It did not take you. The you that is deeper than silk, deeper than merchant, deeper than success or failure. That is still here. That can never be flooded. Jin returned home that night with something he could not quite name. The grief was still there. The loss was still real. But there was also something else now. A small opening, a crack in the wall of his suffering, through which a different kind of light was beginning to enter. In the weeks that followed, he began to rebuild. Not the same business, not the same life, but something new. He had less than before, much less. But he also had something he had not had when he was wealthy. An awareness of what could not be taken from him. A ground that did not depend on his warehouse being full. He saw Shan often after that. Sometimes he would walk down to the river in the evening and they would sit together, watching the water that had taken so much and given something unexpected in return. Jin never became a philosopher or a teacher. He remained a practical man, a merchant, a husband and father. But there was a quality in him now that had not been there before. A steadiness that did not depend on things going well. A peace that had been forged in loss. When younger merchants complained to him about their setbacks and difficulties, Jin would listen patiently. And sometimes, if they seemed ready to hear it, he would tell them about the ferryman's question. What did the river leave? That is worth knowing. Because whatever is left after everything else is gone, that is what you can truly count on. That is the ground that cannot be flooded. This story shows us how loss can become a doorway. Jin did not choose to have his life destroyed. He did not seek out suffering as a spiritual practice. But when the flood came, it stripped away everything he had built, and in that stripping, something else became visible. The ground beneath the ground. The self beneath the self he had constructed. Zen teaches that we are more than our circumstances, more than our successes and failures, more than the stories we tell about ourselves. But we rarely discover this while things are going well. We are too busy building, achieving, maintaining. It is often only when everything falls apart that we find out what we truly are. This is not a reason to seek out disaster, but it is a reason to look differently at the disasters that find us. Within every loss is a potential revelation. Within every ending is a possible beginning. The question is whether we can stay present enough to receive what is being offered, even when what is being offered comes wrapped in pain. The Buddha taught that suffering can be a teacher, not because suffering is good, but because it shows us where we are clinging. When what we cling to is taken away, we have a choice. We can cling harder to what is gone, which only increases our suffering. Or we can let go and discover what remains. What remains is always more than we thought. It has to be, because it does not depend on anything outside itself. Let us explore another story that shows how one woman found this truth through her own kind of loss. In a city known for its musicians, there lived a woman named Mio, who had devoted her life to a stringed instrument called the zither. She had begun playing as a child, and by the time she was grown, she was considered one of the finest players in the region. Her fingers moved across the strings with a grace that seemed almost magical. People would close their eyes when she played and feel that they were being transported somewhere else entirely. Music was everything to Mio. It was how she understood the world, how she expressed what words could not capture, how she connected with something larger than herself. When she played, she disappeared. There was no Mio, no audience, no room. There was only the music, flowing through her like water through a channel. She had built her entire life around her gift. She taught students. She performed at important occasions. She was invited to play for officials and nobles. Her reputation brought her comfort and security. But more than that, it gave her identity. She was the musician. That was who she was. The accident happened on an ordinary day. She was walking home from teaching a lesson when a cart lost its wheel and careened into the street. She threw up her hands to protect her face, and the cart struck her arms, crushing the bones in both her hands. The healer did what he could. The bones were set. The wounds were bound. But when the bandages finally came off, months later, Mio found that her hands would no longer do what she asked of them. The fingers that had once danced across the strings now moved stiffly, painfully. She could make simple movements, hold a cup, write a few characters, but the fluid grace that had been her gift was gone. She tried, of course. For months she tried. She sat with her zither and willed her fingers to move as they once had. Sometimes she could play a few notes before the pain became too great, or the stiffness made her stumble. But the music that emerged was broken, halting, a pale shadow of what it had been. The silence that followed was almost worse than the pain. Mio had lived her life surrounded by music, creating music, being music. Now there was only quiet. The zither sat in the corner of her room, untouched, accusing. She stopped seeing her students. She declined invitations. She stayed in her house, alone with her grief and her useless hands. Her old teacher, a woman named Lim who had guided her since childhood, came to visit. Lim was very old now, her own playing days long behind her. But she had taught many musicians over the decades, and she had seen many kinds of loss. She sat with Mio in the quiet room, looking at the zither in the corner. "You have stopped playing," Lim said. "I cannot play." My hands do not work anymore. I know. I heard what happened. I am sorry. Mio felt tears rise. She had not cried in weeks. The grief had moved beyond tears into something heavier, more numb. It was everything to me, she said. The music. It was who I was. Without it, I do not know who I am. Lim nodded slowly. You believe the music was in your hands. Where else would it be? Lim did not answer immediately. She looked around the room, at the silent instruments, at Mio's bandaged hands resting in her lap. When you played, she said finally, where did the music come from? Before it reached your fingers, before it moved through your arms, where did it begin? Mio did not understand the question. It came from the strings, from the instrument. No, before that, before you touched the strings, when you were about to play, when the music was forming but had not yet sounded, where was it? Mio tried to remember. The moment before playing, the gathering of something inside her, the music taking shape before her hands began to move. It was in me, I suppose. In my mind, or my heart. I do not know how to describe it. Yes, the music was in you. Your hands were only how it came out. The instrument was only how it became sound. But the music itself, the source, that was never in your fingers. But what good is music that cannot come out? What good is a song that cannot be sung? Lim reached over and took Mio's damaged hands gently in her own wrinkled ones. That is what you must discover. I cannot tell you the answer, but I will tell you this. I have known musicians who lost their hands, their hearing, their voices. Some of them were destroyed by the loss, but others found something they did not expect. They found that the music was deeper than they had known, that it did not need an instrument to exist. Mio pulled her hands away, frustrated. That is easy for you to say. You lived your whole life as a musician. You played until you chose to stop. I have been robbed. Yes, you have been robbed. I am not saying the loss is not real. I am saying there may be more than the loss. But you will not find it by hiding in this room, mourning what is gone. Lim left shortly after. Mio sat alone, angry at her teacher's words but also unable to dismiss them entirely. Where did the music come from? She had never thought about it. The music had simply been there, moving through her, and she had let it out through her hands. Now the pathway was blocked. But was the source gone too? Over the following weeks, something shifted in Mio. She began to listen differently. She would sit in her quiet room and listen to the sounds around her. Birds outside the window, wind in the trees, the distant voices of people passing in the street. She had spent her life making sound. Now she was learning to receive it. And slowly, she began to hear something else. Not external sounds, but something internal. A kind of music that had no instrument. It arose in her when she watched the light change on the wall. When she felt the warmth of sun on her skin. When she remembered a melody from long ago and let it play in her mind. This inner music had always been there, she realized. It was what she had been translating through her fingers all along. The zither had been a tool, a way of making the invisible audible. But the source was not the tool. The source was in her. It had always been in her. One evening, she sat in her room as the sun set. She did not reach for her zither. She simply sat, present with the fading light, with her breath, with the quiet, and the music came. Not through her hands, not through strings, not through any instrument at all. It simply arose in her, complete and whole, needing nothing to make it real. She wept then, but not from grief, from recognition. The music had never been in her hands. It had been in her heart, her awareness, her presence with the world. Her hands had been one way of expressing it, but they were not the only way. The music itself was untouchable, unbreakable. In the years that followed, Mio did not perform again. Her hands never recovered enough for that. But she did teach, in a different way than before. She taught students to listen before they played, to find the music inside themselves before trying to bring it out through their instruments. Some of them understood what she was pointing toward. Others did not. But those who understood became different kinds of musicians. Players who knew that the music was not in their fingers but in their whole being. When people asked Mio about her loss, she would sometimes tell them what her teacher had asked her. Where does the music come from? The question had seemed cruel when she first heard it. Now she understood it as the greatest gift Lim had ever given her. I thought the music was in my hands, she would say. When I lost my hands, I thought I lost everything. But I found that the music was deeper than I knew. It was in me all along. My hands were just how I shared it. But the sharing is not the thing itself. The thing itself cannot be injured. It cannot be taken away. Both Jin and Mio lost what they had built their lives around. Jin lost his business, his wealth, his sense of security. Mio lost her ability to play, her identity as a musician, her way of connecting with the world. These losses were real and painful. We should not minimize them or pretend they did not matter. But within each loss, there was a discovery. Jin found a ground beneath his circumstances, an awareness that remained even when everything else was gone. Mio found that the music she loved was not dependent on her hands, that it lived in a deeper place that could not be injured. Zen teaches that our true nature is not what we do or what we have. It is something more fundamental, more indestructible. But we rarely discover this while we are busy doing and having. It is often only when the doing and having are stripped away that we find out who we really are. This is the strange gift that loss can bring. Not that we should seek it, not that we should be grateful for pain, but that within the pain, if we can stay present with it, there is sometimes a revelation, a discovery of what was always there but could not be seen until everything else was gone. Let yourself breathe gently now. Whatever you have lost, whatever has been taken from you, something remains. Something that cannot be flooded or broken. Rest in that now and let it hold you. We often imagine that awakening will reveal something extraordinary, hidden knowledge that has been kept from us, mysterious secrets that explain everything, an experience so profound and unusual that our ordinary lives will seem like distant memories. But those who have awakened report something quite different. What they find is not complex but simple, not hidden but obvious, not extraordinary but utterly ordinary, seen at last for what it truly is. This can be disappointing at first. We want our seeking to lead somewhere special. We want the years of effort, the longing, the struggle to be rewarded with something worthy of all that work. When awakening reveals only this moment, this breath, this simple presence, we may feel cheated. Is that all? But the simplicity is not a consolation prize. It is the treasure itself. The reason awakening feels so profound is not that it shows us something new. It shows us what was always here, what we had been looking past our entire lives. The ordinary world, seen clearly, is more than enough. It always was. We just could not see it until now. Zen masters have always pointed to this simplicity. When students came to them expecting elaborate teachings, they would often say something plain. "Have you eaten your rice? Then wash your bowl." This was not evasion or trickery. It was direct pointing. The extraordinary is hidden in the ordinary because the ordinary is already extraordinary. We do not need to find something special. We need to see what is already here. The Buddha's awakening did not make him more than human. It showed him what being human truly is, what every moment truly contains, what every breath truly offers. The revelation was not of something beyond this life, but of this life itself, seen without the filters of craving and aversion. Let us explore a story that shows how one woman traveled far to discover what was close all along. In a small village surrounded by forest, there lived a woman named Aki who made lanterns. She had learned the craft from her father, who had learned from his father before him. For 3 generations, her family had made the lanterns that lit the village streets and homes. It was simple work: paper and bamboo and candles. Nothing elaborate or fine. The lanterns were practical things, meant to push back the darkness so people could see their way. Aki made them well, as her father had, and people bought them without much thought. A lantern was a lantern. It served its purpose, and that was enough. But Aki had always felt that there must be more to life than making lanterns. She would watch travelers pass through the village, people who had seen distant cities and foreign lands. She would listen to their stories of temples and teachers, of wisdom that could transform a person's understanding of everything. She felt small and limited in her workshop, surrounded by paper and bamboo, making the same simple objects day after day. When she was 35, a difficult year came to the village. The rains failed, and the harvest was poor. People had little money for anything beyond necessities. Aki's lantern sales dropped to almost nothing. She found herself with empty days, sitting in her workshop with nothing to do. In that emptiness, the longing she had always felt grew stronger. There had to be more than this. More than making lanterns in a small village, struggling through hard years, growing old without ever touching something meaningful. She decided that she would use this fallow time to seek what she had always been missing. She had heard of a teacher named Yun who lived in the mountains, many days' journey away. People said this teacher had deep wisdom, that students who visited her returned changed. Aki had no students to teach, no lanterns to make. She packed a small bag and set out. The journey took 9 days. Aki walked through forests and over hills, sleeping in fields and accepting hospitality from strangers. With each day, her anticipation grew. She imagined what the teacher might tell her. Secret knowledge passed down through generations. Practices that would open hidden doors in her mind. Explanations that would make sense of everything she had felt was missing. When she finally reached Yun's dwelling, she was exhausted but excited. The teacher lived in a simple hut on a mountainside, surrounded by pine trees. Aki approached and found an elderly woman sitting outside, mending a torn piece of cloth. "I have come to learn from you," Aki said, bowing respectfully. "I have traveled 9 days to hear your wisdom." Yoon looked up from her mending. Her face was weathered, but her eyes were bright. She studied Aki for a long moment. "What is it you want to know?" Aki had prepared for this question. "I want to understand what life is truly about. I feel that something important is missing, something I cannot find in my ordinary existence. I make lanterns in a small village. It feels meaningless. I want to know what has meaning." Yoon nodded slowly and returned to her mending. Aki waited for the teaching to begin. But Yoon simply continued sewing, her old fingers moving steadily through the fabric. After a long silence, Yoon spoke. "What lights the lantern before you strike the flame?" Aki blinked. She had expected something more elaborate. "I do not understand." "You make lanterns. You light them with flame. But before the flame touches the wick, what is already there? Nothing is there. The lantern is dark until I light it." "Is it?" Look more carefully. "What makes it possible for the lantern to hold light at all?" Aki tried to understand what Yoon was asking. The lantern was just paper and bamboo, a frame to hold a candle. Before the candle was lit, there was only potential. The capacity for light, but not light itself. The structure, I suppose. The space inside that can hold the flame. Yoon smiled slightly, but said nothing more. She continued her mending as if the conversation was complete. Aki waited for further instruction. None came. After a while she asked, "Is that all? Is that the teaching? What more do you need?" Aki felt frustration rising. She had walked for 9 days for this, a riddle about lanterns. She already knew about lanterns. She had made them her whole life. She had come here to learn something new, something beyond her ordinary existence. "I came seeking wisdom," she said, trying to keep her voice respectful. "I do not understand how a question about lanterns helps me find what is missing in my life." Yoon set down her mending and looked at Aki directly. "You have traveled 9 days to escape your life. You think meaning is somewhere else, in teachings and secrets far from your village. But you bring your lanterns with you wherever you go. The question is not what is missing from your life. The question is what you have failed to see in what is already there." She picked up her mending again. "Go home. Make your lanterns. But this time, look at what you are making. Really look. Not at the paper and bamboo. At what makes a lantern a lantern. At what it does. At what it has always done." Aki wanted to argue, to demand more concrete guidance. But something in Yoon's calm certainty stopped her. She stayed that night in the teacher's hut, hoping for more instruction. But Yoon spoke only of ordinary things. The weather, the pine trees, the mending that needed to be done. In the morning, Aki began the long walk home. She was angry for the first few days. She had wasted her time and her small savings on this journey. She had expected secrets and received only a riddle. The teacher had not even tried to help her. She composed arguments in her mind, things she should have said, ways she could have pressed for more. But as the days passed and the familiar landscape of home drew closer, something began to shift. The anger softened into something else. Not understanding yet, but a kind of openness. She noticed things she had not noticed on the journey out. The way light fell through the trees, the smell of rain on dry earth, the simple pleasure of walking, of her body moving through the world. She had been so focused on reaching the teacher that she had missed the journey itself. Now, with nowhere to rush to, she could simply be here, on this path, taking this step. The question stayed with her. What lights the lantern before you strike the flame? She turned it over in her mind as she walked, unable to dismiss it. She thought about her lanterns, the ones she had made all her life without really thinking about them. They were simple objects, practical tools. But what did they actually do? They held light. They made it possible for people to see in darkness. Without the lantern, the flame would gutter out in the wind or set fire to whatever it touched. The lantern contained and protected the light, allowed it to be carried and placed and used. But that was not what Yoon had asked. She had asked what was there before the flame, the capacity to hold light, the space inside that made illumination possible. Aki arrived home and returned to her workshop. She picked up a lantern she had made before leaving, one that had not yet been sold. She looked at it as if she had never seen a lantern before. Paper and bamboo, a simple frame, and inside, a space, a darkness waiting to become light. She struck a match and lit the candle inside. The lantern glowed, pushing back the shadows of the workshop. And suddenly, Aki saw something she had never noticed in all her years of lantern making. The light was not something the lantern created. The light came from the flame. The lantern's job was not to make light, but to receive it, to hold it, to let it shine through. And in that moment, she understood what Yoon had been pointing toward. She had been looking for meaning, for wisdom, for something to fill what felt empty in her life. She had imagined it was somewhere else, in distant teachings, in special knowledge. But she was like a lantern, looking for light, not realizing that her purpose was not to generate illumination but to receive it. What lights the lantern before you strike the flame? The answer was the capacity to receive light, the openness, the space inside that could hold what was offered. Aki had been so focused on what she lacked, on what was missing, that she had never noticed what she already was. She was not meant to create meaning from nothing. She was meant to receive what was already there, to let it shine through her work, through her ordinary life. She looked around her workshop, the paper, the bamboo, the simple tools of her trade. She had thought these things were obstacles to meaning, traps that kept her small. But they were not obstacles. They were her material. They were how she could let light into the world. In the weeks that followed, Aki returned to making lanterns. But something was different now. She no longer felt that her work was meaningless. She understood that meaning was not something she had to find elsewhere and bring back. It was something that was already here, already available, waiting to be received. Her lanterns did not change in any obvious way. They were still paper and bamboo and candles. But people who bought them sometimes remarked that there was something different about them now, a quality they could not name. Aki did not try to explain. She just made her lanterns and let them do what lanterns do. Hold the light. Let it shine. When people asked her about her journey to the mountain teacher, she would tell them about Yoon's question. Most did not understand, just as Aki had not understood at first. But some did. Some heard the question and felt something open in them. What lights the lantern before you strike the flame? It was not a riddle with a clever answer. It was a door to a different way of seeing. I traveled 9 days to learn something I could have learned in my own workshop, she would say. But I had to go that far before I could see what was close. Sometimes we have to exhaust our seeking before we can receive what was always being offered. This story shows us how awakening often reveals something startlingly simple. Aki expected elaborate teachings and received only a question. She expected to find meaning somewhere far away and discovered it had been present in her workshop all along. Zen teaches that what we seek is not hidden from us. It is hidden by us, by our assumptions about what wisdom should look like, by our conviction that the answer must be somewhere other than here. When these assumptions fall away, we find that the ordinary world is more than enough. The simple act of making lanterns, or cooking rice, or walking down a road, contains everything we were looking for. The Buddha spoke of awakening as seeing things as they truly are. This sounds simple, and it is. But the simplicity is not emptiness. It is fullness. When we see a flower as it truly is, without our overlay of concepts and judgments, it is not less than what we thought. It is infinitely more. The whole universe is present in a single blossom. This is what Aki discovered. Her lanterns had always been doing something profound. They were holding light, letting it shine, pushing back darkness. But she had been so busy looking for meaning elsewhere that she had never noticed the meaning right in front of her. Let us explore another story that reveals more of this teaching. In a town known for its beautiful fabrics, there lived a dyer named Min who worked with colors every day. Her workshop was full of brilliant hues. Reds like sunset, blues like deep water, yellows like autumn leaves. People brought her plain cloth, and she transformed it into something vivid and alive. Min was good at her work, but she was never satisfied. Each color she produced seemed to fall short of what she could see in her mind. The red was not quite the red of the poppies she remembered from childhood. The blue was not quite the blue of the sky on the clearest day. There was always a gap between her vision and what her hands could create. This gap troubled her deeply. She would finish a piece of work and feel a momentary satisfaction, but then the comparison would begin. Not quite right. Not quite what she had imagined. The pleasure would drain away, replaced by frustration and the determination to try again. Her family and customers thought her work was beautiful. They did not see the flaws she saw. But their praise did not comfort her. They did not understand what she was reaching for, the perfect color that existed in her mind and refused to appear in her dyes. She felt that if she could only close this gap, if she could only make the colors match what she saw inside, she would finally be at peace. She experimented endlessly with different materials and techniques. She traveled to buy rare pigments. She studied with other dyers. But the gap remained. One day, a traveling monk arrived in the town. His name was Wen, and there was something unusual about him. He was blind. His eyes were clouded, and he walked with a stick, feeling his way through the unfamiliar streets. Someone directed him to Min's workshop, telling him it was a good place to rest. Min welcomed him and offered him tea. She watched him settle into a chair. His sightless eyes turned toward the light from the window as if he could feel it on his face. "They tell me you work with colors," Wen said. "Yes, I am a dyer." "How wonderful. Colors are mysterious things." Min was surprised. "You speak as if you know them." "But forgive me. I thought that I cannot see?" Wen smiled. "I have not always been blind. I remember colors from when I was young, and even now, I experience them in different ways. The warmth of red, the coolness of blue. Colors are not only what the eyes see. Min was intrigued. She had never thought about colors except as visual things. What do you mean? I mean that seeing is not the only way of knowing. Your eyes show you colors, yes. But do they show you all of what color is, or only one way of experiencing it? Min considered this. She had always trusted her eyes completely. They were her tools, her guides to the colors she worked with. But now she wondered if there was something they were not showing her. Wen seemed to sense her curiosity. "May I touch some of your dyed cloth?" Min brought him several samples, each a different color. She watched as he ran his fingers over them slowly, his blind eyes closed, his attention completely focused on what his hands were telling him. "This one is red," he said, holding up a piece of crimson silk. "I can feel it. There is a quality to it, a kind of energy. It is warm." He picked up another piece. "And this is blue, cooler, calmer. It has a different weight to it, though the cloth is the same." Min was astonished. She had dyed both pieces herself and knew he was correct. "How can you tell?" "I do not know how. I only know that colors are more than what eyes see. They have presence. They have feeling. When you lost one way of knowing them, other ways become clearer." He set down the cloth and turned his face toward Min. "You are troubled by something. I can hear it in your voice." Min found herself telling him about her frustration, the gap between her vision and her creations, the endless striving to close it, the feeling that perfect color was always just out of reach. Wen listened until she was finished. Then he asked, "When you imagine the perfect red, where do you see it?" "In my mind, I remember the poppies I saw as a child. That red. I have never been able to match it. And when you look at the red you create, where do you see it?" "In front of me. In the cloth. So you compare what is in your mind with what is in front of you, and they never match." "Yes. That is exactly the problem." Wen nodded slowly. "But where does the seeing itself happen? Not the red in your memory or the red in the cloth. The seeing itself. Where is that?" Min did not understand. "The seeing happens in my eyes, I suppose. Or in my mind. Look at the red cloth in front of you right now. Really look at it. And tell me, where is the experience of seeing happening?" Min looked at a piece of red silk hanging on the wall. She tried to notice where the seeing was happening. The red was on the cloth, but the experience of red, the knowing of it, where was that? She could not locate it exactly. It was not in her eyes. It was not in her mind in the way her memory of poppies was. It was something more immediate, more present. It was just here, just happening. "I cannot say where it is," she admitted. "It is just here." "Yes," Wen said. "The seeing itself is not in the object or in the memory. It is something more basic, more simple. Before you compare and judge, before you decide if the color is good enough, there is just the seeing. Pure experience. That is what you have been overlooking." Min looked at the red silk again. She tried to see it without comparing it to anything, without judging it against her memory of poppies or her idea of perfect red. Just this red. Just this seeing. The color seemed to come alive. It was no longer falling short of something else. It was simply itself, vivid and present. And the seeing of it was not separate from it. There was just this experience, this moment, complete. The gap you have been trying to close does not exist, Wen said gently. You created it by comparing, by reaching for something other than what is here. The colors you make are not less than your visions. They are different, and the seeing of them is itself the gift. Not what is seen, the seeing. Min sat with this for a long time. She looked around her workshop at all the colors she had created and found wanting. The reds and blues and yellows. For the first time, she did not compare them to anything. She simply saw them, and in that simple seeing, they were perfect. Not because they matched some ideal, because they were what they were, and she was present to see them. She understood now what she had been missing. She had been so focused on the objects of her seeing, on making them match her visions, that she had never noticed the seeing itself. The simple awareness that made all color possible. This awareness was not flawed. It was not striving. It was just here, open and clear, receiving whatever was offered. After Wen left, Min continued her work. She still experimented with colors, still tried to create beautiful things. But the desperate striving was gone. She no longer measured each creation against an impossible ideal. She made her colors and she saw them, and the seeing was enough. People noticed a change in her. She seemed more at peace. Her workshop, once a place of frustration, became calmer. And strangely, her colors seemed more alive now, though she was not trying as hard. Perhaps because she was no longer fighting against what she made. Perhaps because she had finally learned to see. Both Aki and Min discovered something simple that transformed their relationship with their work and their lives. Aki discovered that her purpose was not to create meaning but to receive it, like a lantern receiving light. Min discovered that the gap she had been trying to close existed only in her comparisons, and that simple seeing was itself complete. Zen teaches that awakening does not add anything to us. It subtracts. It removes the overlay of concepts and comparisons that prevent us from seeing what is already here. When these fall away, we find that ordinary experience is more than enough. The simple act of seeing a color, of lighting a lantern, of breathing this breath, is complete in itself. The Buddha pointed to this simplicity throughout his teaching. He did not offer elaborate metaphysics or complicated practices. He offered a clear seeing of what is. When we see clearly, without the distortions of craving and aversion, we discover that we already have what we were seeking. We always did. We just could not see it until we stopped looking for something else. This is perhaps the most surprising thing about sudden awakening. After all the seeking, after all the longing for something more, what we find is simply this moment, this experience, this ordinary life. But seen clearly, it is everything. It is more than enough. It is what we were looking for all along. Let your eyes soften now and let your breath settle. The simplicity is here. It does not need to be found. It only needs to be noticed. Rest in that noticing and let it hold you. Zen Buddhism tells us something important about sudden awakening. It does not take us out of our lives. We do not float away to some higher realm where ordinary concerns no longer touch us. We return to the same world we left, with the same body, the same responsibilities, the same people around us. We still need to eat and sleep and work. We still have to deal with difficulties and disappointments. And yet, something is different. Not the circumstances, but how we meet them. The wood is the same wood. The water is the same water. But we are not the same person carrying them. Something has shifted in us, and that shift changes everything without changing anything. This can be confusing for those who expect awakening to solve all their problems. They imagine that once they see clearly, struggle will end. Life will become easy. Difficulties will melt away. But this is not what the masters describe. They describe a different relationship with difficulty, not an escape from it. The Buddha did not stop having a body that aged and got sick. He did not stop encountering people who misunderstood him or opposed him. He walked the same dusty roads and ate the same simple food as everyone else. But he walked and ate differently. He met each moment with a presence and clarity that transformed the ordinary into something luminous. This is what returning to the world looks like after awakening. We do not become special beings exempt from the human condition. We become more fully human. We enter our lives more completely than before. We bring what we have seen back to the chopping and the carrying, and we discover that these simple acts contain everything we were seeking. Let us explore a story that shows how one man brought his awakening back to his work. In a region of deep gorges and rushing rivers, there lived a man named Rio who built bridges. It was dangerous work. The gorges were wide and the drops were long. Every bridge required men to work suspended over emptiness, trusting their ropes and their skills to keep them alive. Rio had been building bridges for 20 years. He was good at it. He understood how wood and stone and rope worked together, how to read the wind and the weather, how to keep his crew safe while still getting the work done. Dozens of bridges stood because of him, connecting villages that had once been separated by impassable terrain. But the work had taken something from him over the years. He had seen men fall. He had made decisions that cost lives when things went wrong. He remembered each of them. Their faces would come to him at night when he could not sleep. The choices he had replayed 1,000 times, wondering if he could have done something different, wondering if a better man would have seen the danger sooner. The responsibility weighed on him constantly. Every bridge he built carried the memory of what could happen, what had happened. He did his work well, but he did it with a kind of grim endurance. There was no joy in it anymore, only the determination to get through each project without losing anyone else. His wife noticed the change in him. When they had married, he had been full of energy and purpose. Now he came home exhausted and distant. He slept poorly. He rarely laughed. She worried that the work was destroying him, but she also knew he would not stop. Building bridges was who he was. He did not know how to be anyone else. One autumn, Rio was leading a crew on a particularly difficult crossing. The gorge was wider than most, the river below fast and cold. They had been working for months, slowly extending the bridge from both sides, waiting for the moment when they could connect the two halves and complete the span. Rio was out on the unfinished edge, checking the placement of a critical beam. Below him, nothing but air and the distant sound of water. He had been in this position hundreds of times. His body knew the work, knew how to move, knew how to stay safe. But something was different this day. Perhaps it was the angle of the light. Perhaps it was the particular quality of the silence. Perhaps it was simply that he was ready. He paused in his work and looked around. The mountains rose on either side. The sky stretched blue and endless above. The beam he was holding was solid and real in his hands. And for a moment, everything shifted. He could not have described it afterward. It was as if the boundary between himself and everything else had grown thin and then dissolved. There was no Rio separate from the bridge, no bridge separate from the gorge, no gorge separate from the mountains and sky. There was just this moment, this presence, complete and whole and needing nothing. The feeling passed. He was just a man on a bridge again, with work to do and a crew waiting for him. But something had changed. The grim weight he had been carrying felt lighter. Not gone, but different. The fear was still there, but it was no longer the center of everything. It was just one part of a much larger whole. He finished his work and climbed back to solid ground. That evening, he sat by the fire with his crew, but he was quiet, turning over what had happened. He did not try to explain it to anyone. He was not sure there were words for it. Over the following days, he noticed changes in how he worked. The fear of what could go wrong was still present, but it no longer controlled him. He could acknowledge it and then set it aside, giving his full attention to what was in front of him. This beam, this rope, this moment of work, not the memories of past failures, not the anticipation of future disasters, just this. His crew noticed something different about him. He was calmer, more present. When problems arose, he dealt with them without the tight anxiety that had characterized him for years. He made the same careful decisions, took the same precautions, but there was a steadiness in him that had not been there before. When the bridge was finally completed, Rio stood in the middle of the span and looked out at the view. Mountains and sky and the river far below. It was beautiful, and he let himself feel the beauty without the usual overlay of worry. His foreman, a man named Tao who had worked with him for 15 years, came to stand beside him. "Something happened to you," Tao said. "On the bridge. A few weeks ago. I saw it in your face when you came down." Rio considered how to respond. Tao was a practical man, not given to philosophical discussions. But he was also a friend who had watched Rio struggle for years. "I saw something," Rio said finally. "Or maybe I stopped seeing something. I am not sure how to explain it. You seem lighter, less afraid." "I am still afraid. Building bridges is dangerous work. But the fear is not everything anymore. It is just part of what is here. Before, it was like a wall around everything. Now, it is more like weather. It comes and goes." Tao nodded slowly. "So what do you do differently now?" Rio thought about it. "Nothing, really. The work is the same. The dangers are the same. I still make careful decisions. I still take precautions. But I am more here for it. Less in my head worrying about what might happen. More present with what is actually happening. And that helps. It helps me. I do not know if it makes the bridges any safer, but it makes the building more bearable. More than bearable. Sometimes it is even..." He paused, searching for the word. "Good. It feels good to be here, doing this work. I had forgotten that was possible. When Rio returned home, his wife saw the change immediately. The weight he had been carrying was still there, but it was not crushing him anymore. He slept better. He laughed sometimes at dinner the way he used to. He was present with her in a way he had not been for years. "What happened?" she asked one evening. Rio told her about the moment on the bridge, about the way everything had shifted and then shifted back, about how the work felt different now, even though nothing had actually changed. "I used to feel like I was fighting against the work," he said. Fighting against the fear, against the responsibility, against everything that could go wrong. It was exhausting. Every day felt like a battle. And now it is not a battle. The same things are there. The fear, the danger, the weight of responsibility. But I am not fighting against them. They are just part of what is here, like the wind or the cold. You do not fight the weather. You work with it. His wife was quiet for a moment. "I do not understand it," she admitted. "I cannot explain why a moment of seeing something should change how I feel about my whole life. But it did. The bridges are the same. The dangers are the same. I am the same man, mostly. But something is different in how I carry it all." His wife took his hand. "You carry it more lightly." "Yes, that is exactly it. I carry it more lightly. Not because it is less heavy, but because I am not fighting against it anymore. It is just what is here. The work, the fear, the responsibility. I can hold it all without being crushed by it." Rio built bridges for another 12 years after that day on the gorge. He lost men again, because bridge building is dangerous, and sometimes things go wrong despite every precaution. Those losses hurt him, as they had always hurt him. He did not become immune to pain or grief, but he did not let the grief become a wall around his life. He felt it, honored it, and continued. He brought his presence to each new project, each new crew, each new moment of work. The bridges he built were not better than before, not in any measurable way. But the building of them was different. It was bearable now. Sometimes it was even beautiful. When young builders asked him for advice, he would tell them the practical things: how to read weather, how to choose materials, how to keep crews safe. But sometimes, with those who seemed ready to hear it, he would tell them about the moment on the bridge, about seeing that they were not separate from their work, not separate from the fear, not separate from anything, about how that seeing could change everything without changing anything at all. "The bridge is still the bridge," he would say. "The work is still the work, but you can be here for it differently. You can let it be what it is without fighting against it. That does not make it easy, but it makes it possible, and sometimes that is enough." This story shows us what it looks like to return to ordinary life after a moment of awakening. Rio did not stop building bridges. He did not become fearless or immune to loss. He returned to the same work, the same dangers, the same responsibilities. But he carried them differently. He was present for his life in a way he had not been before. Zen teaches that awakening is not an escape from the human condition. It is a deeper entry into it. We still experience fear and loss and difficulty, but we meet these experiences with more presence, more openness. We are less caught in our resistance to what is happening and more able to simply be with it. The Buddha walked dusty roads and dealt with difficult people and watched his body age. Awakening did not exempt him from any of this. What it gave him was a different relationship with it. He could be present with suffering without being destroyed by it. He could meet each moment fully, whether it brought pleasure or pain. This is what we bring back from awakening. Not immunity from life, but intimacy with it. Not escape from difficulty, but presence with difficulty. The wood is still wood. The water is still water, but we carry them with a lightness that was not there before. Let us explore another story that shows how awakening returns to ordinary life. In a village where the smell of baking bread drifted through the streets each morning, there lived a woman named Sue who had been a baker for 30 years. She had learned the craft from her mother, working beside her from the time she was a small child. Flour and water and yeast. Fire and time and patience. The rhythms of bread had shaped her entire life. Sue was good at her work. Her loaves were reliable, nourishing, exactly what people expected from her. She opened her shop before dawn and worked until midday, producing batch after batch of the bread that fed the village. It was honest work, useful work. She had nothing to complain about. But somewhere over the years, the joy had drained out of it. She could not have said when it happened. It was a gradual fading, like color leaching out of fabric left too long in the sun. She still did the work well, but she did it mechanically, without presence. Her hands knew what to do while her mind wandered elsewhere. She thought about old regrets. She worried about future problems. She relived conversations and rehearsed arguments. Anything but being here, in this bakery, with this dough. She was rarely truly there in her bakery, even though her body never left. Her customers did not seem to notice. The bread came out correctly. It fed people as bread should. But Sue knew something was missing, even if she could not name what it was. Her days blurred together. One morning of kneading was much like another. One batch of loaves was much like the last. She counted the years until she could stop, until she could rest, until she could be done with the endless repetition. But the years stretched out before her, and she did not know how to make them pass faster. One morning, Sue was working the dough as she had done thousands of times before. It was early, still dark outside, the village asleep. She was alone with the flour and the water and the soft rhythm of her hands pressing and folding. She was not thinking about anything in particular. Her mind was quiet for once, too tired in the early hour for its usual wandering. There was just the dough, just her hands, just this motion she had made so many times it required no thought at all. And then something shifted. She could not have said what was different. The dough was the same dough. Her hands were the same hands. The motion was the same motion. But suddenly she was there, fully present in a way she had not been for years, maybe decades. She felt the dough beneath her fingers, really felt it. The way it yielded and pushed back. The way it was slowly coming alive under her hands, the yeast beginning its quiet work. The warmth of it, the smell of it, the simple reality of flour and water becoming something new. She looked around her bakery as if seeing it for the first time. The worn wooden counter where she had worked for 30 years. The oven that had baked countless loaves. The pale light beginning to show through the window. All of it suddenly vivid, suddenly present, suddenly enough. Tears came to her eyes, though she was not sad. She kept working the dough, letting the tears fall, not understanding what was happening, but not needing to understand. She was here. She was finally here. After years of being somewhere else in her mind, she had come back to her own life. The bread she baked that morning was no different from any other batch. The same flour, the same process, the same oven. But when her first customer came in, an old woman named Hannah, who had been buying bread from Sue for 20 years, something strange happened. Hannah took a bite of her morning roll and paused. She looked at the bread in her hand, then looked at Sue. "This is different," she said. "It is the same recipe I always use." "I know. But something is different. It tastes." Hannah searched for the word. "More like bread. More like it should taste." "Did you change something?" Sue thought about the morning. The moment of presence while kneading. The tears she could not explain. "I do not know. Maybe I paid more attention." Other customers noticed it too over the following days. Something had changed in Sue's bread. Not the ingredients or the technique. Something else. A quality that was hard to name. People said the bread tasted more real, more alive, as if it had been made by someone who was actually there while making it. Sue did not tell anyone about her experience. She did not fully understand it herself, but she tried to stay present now, as she worked. Not every moment. Her mind still wandered sometimes, still got lost in thoughts about the past or future. But more often than before, she was here. With the dough, with the flour, with the fire and the bread and the morning light. Her life had not changed. She still woke before dawn. She still worked until midday. She still made the same bread she had always made. But she was present for it now. And that presence made the difference between a life she was enduring and a life she was actually living. One day, her niece came to learn the craft. She was young and eager, wanting to know all the secrets of good bread. Sue taught her the practical things, the proportions, the timing, the way to know when the dough was ready. But she also tried to teach her something else. "The bread knows if you are here or not," she told her niece. "I do not know how, but it knows. If your mind is somewhere else while your hands are working, the bread will be ordinary. Correct, but not alive. But if you are truly present, if you are really here with the flour and the water, something else happens. The bread becomes more than the sum of its ingredients." Her niece looked skeptical. "How can bread know anything? It is just flour and water." "I do not know how. I only know that it is true. I spent years making bread while my mind was elsewhere. The bread was fine. People ate it, but it was not alive. Now I try to be here, really here, and the bread is different. People can taste the difference, even if they cannot explain it." "How do you stay present? My mind wanders all the time." Sue smiled. "Mine does too. You cannot force presence. You can only notice when you have left and come back. Again and again, notice and return. It is not about being present all the time. It is about coming back when you realize you have gone. The returning is the practice." She showed her niece how to knead, guiding her hands through the motion. "Feel the dough," she said. "Not with your thoughts about dough. with your actual fingers. Feel how it pushes back. Feel when it becomes smooth and alive. Let your hands tell you what is happening, not your ideas about what should be happening. Her niece worked the dough, trying to feel what Sue described. It was harder than it sounded. Her mind kept jumping ahead to the next step, or back to something that had happened yesterday. "I keep losing it," she said. "Of course you do." Everyone does. The mind is like a puppy that wants to run everywhere. You do not punish it for running. You just gently bring it back. Again and again. That is all. That is the whole practice. The years that followed were not easier than the years before. Sue still grew tired. Her body still ached from the early mornings and the long hours. She still had days when she wanted to be done with all of it. But something had changed. She was living her life now, not just passing through it. The same flower, the same water, the same fire, but she was there for it. And being there made all the difference. When people asked her what had changed, she found it hard to explain. "I woke up," she would say sometimes. "I had been asleep for years, even though my eyes were open and my hands were working. Then one morning I woke up, and I have been trying to stay awake ever since." It was not a perfect answer. It did not capture what had happened or how, but it was as close as she could come. She had woken up. She had come back to her life. And the bread knew, even if no one else could understand. Both Rio and Sue returned to their ordinary lives after their moments of awakening. They did not become teachers or monks. They did not withdraw from the world. They went back to building bridges and baking bread, the same work they had been doing all along. But they did the work differently. They were present for it in a way they had not been before. And that presence changed everything without changing anything. The bridges were still bridges. The bread was still bread. But there was a quality now, a life in the work that had been missing. Zen teaches that awakening is not separate from ordinary life. It does not happen somewhere else and then need to be brought back. It happens here, in the midst of our daily activities, in the chopping of wood and carrying of water. And it continues to unfold here, in every moment that we meet with presence. The Buddha did not stop walking when he awakened. He walked for the rest of his life, teaching and helping and meeting each day as it came. But his walking was different. He was there for it. He was present with each step, each breath, each encounter. This is what we are invited to discover. Not a special state that takes us out of our lives, but a presence that transforms our lives from within. The same circumstances met differently. The same work, done with awareness. The same world, seen with open eyes. As you rest here tonight, consider your own ordinary life. The work you do, the routines you follow, the simple acts that make up your days. Each of these is an opportunity for presence. Each is a place where awakening can continue to unfold. You do not need to find something special. You only need to be here, fully, for what is already given. Let your body settle now into rest. Tomorrow you will return to your life, to your work, to the ordinary things that fill your days. But you can return with presence. You can be there for it. Let that possibility rest in you as you drift towards sleep. We often think of awakening as an arrival, a destination we have been traveling toward, a finish line we finally cross after years of seeking. We imagine that once we get there, the journey will be complete. We will have found what we were looking for, and we can finally rest. But Zen teaches something different. Awakening is not an ending. It is a beginning. The moment of seeing is like a door opening, not a door closing. What matters is not just that we saw, but how we live from what we have seen. And the seeing itself must be renewed, again and again, in each fresh moment. This can feel disappointing at first. We want our awakening to be permanent, a transformation that lasts forever without further effort. We want to achieve enlightenment and then be done with the whole business. But reality does not work this way. The door that opened can close again. The clarity that came can cloud over. The presence we discovered can slip away as old habits reassert themselves. This is not failure. It is simply how awakening works in human beings. We are not meant to have one experience and coast on it for the rest of our lives. We are meant to wake up, again and again, in each new moment. Each morning is an opportunity. Each breath is an invitation. The awakening that happened yesterday must happen again today, and tomorrow, and the day after. The Buddha did not stop practicing after his awakening. He continued for 45 years, walking and teaching and meeting each day with presence. His awakening was not a trophy he put on a shelf. It was a living thing that he cultivated and expressed through every action. This is the teaching of awakening as beginning. Not a single event, but a continuous unfolding. Not an achievement, but a way of being. Not something we have, but something we do, moment by moment, for as long as we live. Let us explore a story that shows how one young woman learned this truth. In a town known for its beautiful rooftops, there lived a young woman named Pim who made tiles. She had learned the craft from her aunt, shaping clay into the curved pieces that protected homes from rain and sun. It was good work, practical work, and Pim did it well. But Pim had always felt that there was more to life than making tiles. She read books about wisdom and enlightenment. She listened to travelers who spoke of teachers and teachings. She longed to understand something deeper about existence, something that would transform her ordinary days into something meaningful. When she was 25, she began studying with an old woman named Kira, who lived on the edge of town. Kira had once been a wandering teacher, but age had settled her into one place. Now students came to her instead of her going to them. Kira did not teach in elaborate ways. She did not give long lectures or assign difficult practices. She simply lived her life and let Pim be part of it. They would sit together in the morning, watching the light change. They would work in the garden, pulling weeds and tending vegetables. They would share simple meals, eating in silence or talking about ordinary things. Sometimes Kira would say something that Pim would turn over in her mind for days. A question with no obvious answer. An observation that seemed simple, but opened into something vast. Mostly, though, they were just present together, doing ordinary things. Pim was often frustrated by this approach. She wanted teaching, not gardening. She wanted wisdom, not weeding. She had read about masters who gave powerful transmissions, who opened students' minds with a single word. This slow daily life seemed like a waste of time. She kept waiting for the real instruction to begin, the secret knowledge that would change everything. Surely there was more than this. Surely Kira was holding something back, waiting until Pim was ready. "When will you teach me about awakening?" she asked one day, unable to contain her impatience. Kira looked up from the vegetables she was tending. "What do you think I have been doing? We pull weeds. We cook rice. We sit in silence. I do not see how this leads to understanding." Kira smiled. "Understanding is not somewhere else. It is not waiting at the end of a special teaching. It is here, in the weeds and the rice and the silence. If you cannot find it here, you will not find it anywhere." Pim tried to accept this, but she remained impatient. She wanted something dramatic to happen, a moment of transformation that would prove she was making progress. And then one afternoon, it came. Pim was working alone in her tile workshop. She had been with Kira for 3 years by then, and something had been building in her, though she could not have said what. She was shaping a tile, her hands moving through the familiar motions, when suddenly everything shifted. She could not describe it afterward. It was as if a veil had been lifted. A film she had not known was there suddenly cleared away. She saw the clay in her hands, really saw it. She felt her own presence, her own awareness, as something vast and clear. The boundary between herself and the world felt thin, almost transparent. Everything was vivid, alive, complete. The feeling lasted perhaps a minute. Then it faded, and she was just Pim in her workshop again, holding a half-formed tile. But she knew something had happened. Something important. She rushed to Kira's house, her heart pounding with excitement. She tried to explain what she had experienced, stumbling over words that seemed inadequate. Kira listened carefully. When Pim finished, the old woman nodded. "Good," she said. Now what? Pim was confused. She had expected more than this. Praise, perhaps. Confirmation that she had achieved something significant. Acknowledgement that her years of patient waiting had finally paid off. "What do you mean, now what? I had an awakening. I saw something I have never seen before." "Yes, you did. And now, what will you do with it? I do not understand." "Is that not enough? Have I not arrived somewhere?" Kira gestured for Pim to sit down. They were in the garden, surrounded by the vegetables they had tended together for 3 years. "Let me tell you something about awakening," Kira said. "It is real. What you experienced was real. I am not dismissing it. But it is not what you think it is." She picked up a handful of soil and let it sift through her fingers. "You think awakening is like climbing a mountain. You struggle and strive, and finally you reach the summit, and then you are done. You have arrived. You can plant your flag and rest. Is it not like that? No. Awakening is more like learning to walk. The first step is wonderful, miraculous even. But it is not the end. It is the beginning. Now, you must take another step. And another. And another. For the rest of your life, you will be taking steps." Pim felt deflated. She had thought she was done with seeking, done with striving. She had thought she could finally rest. "So, the experience I had means nothing? It means everything. But not in the way you hoped. It showed you what is possible. It gave you a taste of clarity. But now, you must learn to live from that clarity, day by day, moment by moment. The experience will fade. The vividness will dim. Old habits will return. You will forget what you saw. And then you must remember again. And then you will forget again. And then you must remember again. This is the path. Not a single arrival, but countless returns. Pim sat with this for a long time. It was not the answer she wanted, but something in her knew it was true. How do I return when I have forgotten, the same way you arrived in the first place? By being present, by paying attention, by letting go of your ideas about how things should be and seeing how they actually are. You did it once in your workshop. You can do it again. Not the same experience, perhaps, but the same seeing, the same presence. Will it get easier? Kira smiled. In some ways, yes. You will learn the terrain. You will recognize when you have drifted away and find your way back more quickly. But in other ways, no. There will always be forgetting. There will always be the need to return. Even after 50 years, I still forget. I still have to come back. You still forget? After all this time? Of course. I am human. My mind wanders. My habits pull me away. But I have learned not to judge the forgetting. It is not failure. It is just what minds do. The practice is not to never forget. The practice is to always return. Pim went back to her workshop and her tiles. The vivid clarity of her experience did fade, as Kira had said it would. Days came when she felt no different from before, when the whole thing seemed like a dream she had imagined. But she remembered Kira's words. She did not judge herself for forgetting. She simply tried to return, to be present with the clay, to feel her hands shaping each tile, to let go of her thoughts about past and future and simply be here, now, with what was in front of her. Sometimes the presence came easily. Sometimes it did not come at all. But she kept practicing, kept returning, kept beginning again. Years passed. Pim became skilled not just at making tiles, but at the practice of return. She learned to notice when she had drifted away and to come back without self-criticism. She learned that awakening was not something she had achieved once, but something she participated in again and again. There were difficult times. Seasons when the presence seemed very far away, when she felt as ordinary and unawakened as she had before her experience. She would doubt whether it had been real at all. But she remembered Kira's words and did not judge herself. She simply returned, as best she could, to whatever was in front of her. And there were other times, unexpected moments, when the vividness returned. Not always in dramatic ways. Sometimes just a sudden clarity while shaping a tile, or a moment of deep peace while drinking tea. These moments could not be forced or predicted. They came when they came. Her job was simply to stay available. When young people came to her asking about enlightenment, she would tell them about her experience in the workshop. But she would also tell them what Kira had told her. Awakening is real. It will change you, but it is not an ending. It is the beginning of a different kind of life. A life of paying attention. A life of returning. You will forget what you have seen. That is certain, but you can always come back. That is certain too. Some of them were disappointed, as she had been disappointed. They wanted a finish line, an achievement, a permanent transformation. But some of them understood. They saw that a life of returning was not a burden, but a gift. Each return was fresh. Each moment of presence was complete in itself. There was no need to hold on to past awakenings when new ones were always available. Every morning is a new beginning, Pim would tell them. Every breath is a chance to return. You do not need the experience you had yesterday. You need the presence you can have right now. That is always available. That is always enough. This story shows us that awakening is not an achievement we complete, but a practice we continue. Pim had a genuine experience of clarity, but she had to learn that this experience was not the end of her journey. It was the beginning of a new way of living, one that required ongoing attention and repeated return. Zen teaches that enlightenment is not a state we achieve and then possess forever. It is more like a fire that must be tended, a garden that must be cultivated. The moment of seeing is precious, but it must be renewed. The clarity that came must be invited back, again and again, through presence and attention. The Buddha continued to practice after his awakening. He did not sit back and rest on what he had attained. He walked and taught and engaged with life fully for another 45 years. His awakening was not a trophy, but a living reality that he expressed through each action. This is both humbling and encouraging. Humbling because we cannot expect a single experience to transform us permanently. We will forget. We will drift. We will need to return. But encouraging because the return is always possible. No matter how long we have been lost in distraction, we can always come back. Each moment offers a fresh beginning. Let us explore another story that shows how even a lifetime of awakening is still a continuous beginning. In a village by the sea where the sound of waves was constant as breathing, there lived a man named Li who mended nets for the fishing boats. It was simple work, patient work. His fingers knew the knots without his mind needing to guide them. He had been mending nets for 40 years, since he was a boy learning from his father. Li had heard of a teacher named Jin who lived further up the coast. She was very old now, over 80 years, and had been teaching for more than 50 of those years. People spoke of her with reverence. Students had traveled great distances to learn from her. Some said she was the wisest person alive. Li had always been curious about such things. He read what he could find about wisdom and enlightenment. He wondered what it would be like to meet someone who had spent a lifetime in awakening. Surely such a person would have achieved something extraordinary, something beyond what ordinary people like himself could imagine. One spring, Li decided to make the journey. It was not far, perhaps 2 days of walking along the coast. He packed a small bag and set out, his mind full of questions he wanted to ask. What had she learned in 50 years? What states had she achieved? What was it like to live in constant awakening? He imagined her sitting in deep meditation, surrounded by devoted students. He imagined profound conversations about the nature of reality. He imagined that being in her presence would feel different somehow, charged with spiritual power. He found Jin's house easily. It was small and simple, set back from the shore among wind-bent pines. As he approached, he saw an old woman sitting outside on a wooden bench. She was mending a fishing net. Li stopped, uncertain. This could not be the famous teacher. Surely someone of her reputation would be doing something more important than mending nets. But when he asked, the woman confirmed that she was indeed Jin. She invited him to sit beside her on the bench. "I have come to learn from you," Lee said. "I have heard of your wisdom. I hoped you might teach me something about awakening." Jin did not look up from her work. Her old fingers moved steadily, tying knots, repairing tears. "What would you like to know?" Lee had prepared questions, but suddenly they all seemed foolish. He watched her hands moving through the net, so similar to his own work back home. He had expected something different, something more elevated. "I do not know," he admitted. "I thought you would be doing something else, something more spiritual." Jin smiled, still working. "What could be more spiritual than mending a net?" "I do not know. Meditating, perhaps. Teaching. Contemplating deep truths. I have done all of those things. For 50 years, I have done them. And do you know what I have learned?" Lee leaned forward, eager to hear the wisdom she had gathered over half a century. "I have learned that mending a net is as good as any of it. Better, maybe. The net is real. The knots are real. My hands are real. When I am here, fully present with the mending, there is nothing lacking. Nothing more spiritual somewhere else." Lee sat with this for a while. It was not what he had expected. He had imagined elaborate teachings, profound insights, states of consciousness beyond ordinary experience. Instead, here was an old woman mending a net, just as he mended nets back home. "After 50 years of teaching," he asked, "are you still awakening, or have you arrived somewhere final?" Jin laughed, a warm sound like waves on rocks. "Every day I wake up. Every net I mend. Every knot I tie. That is my awakening. There is no arriving somewhere final. There is only this moment, and then the next, and then the next. But surely after so long, it must be different for you than for someone just beginning." Jin paused her work and looked at him directly. Her eyes were bright despite her age, full of something he could not name. "Different in some ways. I have learned the terrain. I recognize the traps my mind sets for me. I know how to return when I have wandered. But the returning itself, the waking up, that is always fresh. It is not something I achieved long ago and now possess. It is something I do, every day, every moment. Today's awakening does not depend on yesterday's. It stands on its own." She held up the net she was working on. "Do you see these knots? Each one is complete in itself. It does not need the ones before it or after it to be whole. My practice is the same. Each moment of presence is complete. I do not accumulate awakening like coins in a jar. I simply show up, again and again, and see what is here." Lee stayed with Jin for 3 days. She did not give him formal teachings or assign him practices. She simply lived her life and let him be part of it. They mended nets together, working side by side in comfortable silence. They cooked simple meals of fish and rice. They sat watching the sea as the sun rose and set. At first, Lee kept waiting for the real teaching to begin. Surely she would eventually reveal the deeper wisdom, the secret practices, the truths she had gathered over 50 years. But the days passed, and there was only this: nets and meals, and the sound of waves. Slowly, Lee began to understand that this was the teaching. Not something added on top of ordinary life, but ordinary life itself, met with full presence. Jin was not hiding anything. She was showing him everything, in every moment they spent together. On his last morning, Lee asked her one final question. How do you keep beginning after so many years? Does it not grow tiresome, always starting over? Jin considered this, her hands still for once, resting in her lap. When you mend a net, do you grow tired of each knot being new? Do you wish you could tie one perfect knot and be done with it forever? No. Each knot is just what needs to be done in that moment. Exactly. Each moment of awakening is the same. It is just what needs to be done. Not a burden. Not a tiresome repetition. Simply this. Now. Here. When you see it that way, there is no tiredness. There is only freshness. Only beginning. She picked up her needle and thread and returned to her work. Go home, she said gently. Mend your nets. Be present with your work, your life, your breath. That is the whole teaching. Not something complicated you need to learn from a famous teacher. Just this. Again and again. Just this. Lee walked home along the coast, watching the waves, feeling the wind, noticing his feet on the sand. He had expected to return with special knowledge, secret teachings, something that set him apart from who he had been before. Instead, he returned with something simpler, the understanding that awakening was not somewhere else, not something to achieve, not a destination to reach. It was here, in this step, this breath, this moment. And it would be here again in the next one, waiting for him to show up. He went back to mending nets. The work was the same as before, but he was present for it now in a new way. Not because he had learned something special, but because he had learned that nothing special was needed. Just presence, just attention, just beginning again, as many times as it took, for as long as he lived. Both Pim and Lee discovered that awakening is not a destination, but a continuous beginning. Pim had to learn that her moment of clarity was not an ending, but a starting point for a life of return. Lee discovered that even after 50 years, Jin was still beginning fresh each day, still showing up, still mending nets with full presence. Zen teaches that there is no final arrival. Even the greatest masters continue to practice, continue to return, continue to wake up. This is not because they have failed to achieve something permanent. It is because awakening is not a thing to be achieved. It is a way of being that must be lived, moment by moment. This teaching is both humbling and liberating. Humbling because we cannot expect to reach a point where effort is no longer needed. There is always forgetting, always drifting, always the need to return. But liberating because the return is always available. No matter how many times we forget, we can always begin again. The door is never permanently closed. The invitation is always open. As you rest here tonight, let go of any expectation that you should have arrived somewhere by now. Let go of judgment about how many times you have forgotten, how often you have drifted away. The practice is not about never forgetting. It is about always returning. And you can return right now. This breath, this moment, this gentle awareness that is here whenever you remember to notice it. Tomorrow you will forget again. That is certain. And then you will remember. And then you will forget. And then you will remember. This is the path. Not a straight line to a destination, but a dance of forgetting and returning, again and again, for as long as you live. Each return is fresh. Each beginning is complete. You do not need yesterday's awakening. You only need the presence that is available right now. Let your body settle into stillness. Feel the breath moving gently. You are beginning right now, in this moment. And tomorrow, you will begin again. That is enough. That has always been enough. We have traveled together tonight through many stories and teachings, exploring the nature of sudden awakening. We have seen how it arrives unexpectedly, in ordinary moments when we least expect it. We have learned that something ripens in us over time, preparing us for the flash we cannot force. We have discovered that the doorway is not on some distant mountain, but right here, in the kitchen, the workshop, the daily tasks of our lives. We have witnessed how loss can crack us open, revealing what cannot be taken away. We have found that what awakening shows us is startlingly simple, not hidden knowledge, but the ordinary seen at last for what it is. We have seen how we return to the same lives after awakening, chopping wood and carrying water, but meeting these tasks with new presence. And we have learned that awakening is not an ending but a continuous beginning, a practice of returning again and again to this moment. Sudden awakening is real. It can change us, but it does not exempt us from being human. It invites us more deeply into our humanity, into the simple wonder of being alive, breathing, present. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let go of seeking anything special. Let go of expecting awakening to arrive in some dramatic form. Simply rest here, in this breath, in this moment. This is where awakening lives. This is where it has always been waiting. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.